welcome everybody. Today we are going to be taking a look at all of Berserker's weapons once again and ranking them in our tier list. This will include the brand new Blood Sickle, which is a new tier 4 weapon for Berserker. It is a giant scythe, which is pretty awesome, at least in concept. We'll get around to talking that. First, let's start out with all the beginning stuff. We'll just go down the line from tier 1 all the way up to tier 5. So first up, we have our starting weapon. This is the Krovel, and the Krovel is a pretty decent starting weapon. You can get through most of the stage. You can actually get through the entire game just with the Krovel if you really want to. It doesn't weigh that much. It swings pretty quick, both in light attacks and heavy attack. Its heavy attacks count as blunt, and that's pretty useful. Blunt is a little bit more useful than slashing or piercing damage because less things resisted, but not by that much. It's not a huge advantage just by having that. And block and parry's nice. It scales okay with upgrades, but honestly it's not that great for upgrading, and I wouldn't really recommend throwing upgrades into it. But if you can parry and you can land those heavy attacks, it can do really well. It can one-shot armoreds, and it can one-shot bloats so long as you have the smash ability in level 20, which makes it really nice for the beginning of the game. And it makes a fantastic weapon for just starting out and using throughout the majority of the game, honestly. So Krovel, I'm going to put this one up into B tier. It's honestly not a bad weapon overall. It's pretty decent for a tier 1 weapon. We have the lawnmower knife, or lawnmower blade that's converted to the knife, which is Berserker's knife for some reason. You're basically never going to be using the Berserker's knife unless you're just doing it as a challenge to kill everything with a knife. So this is going to go into D tier. Basically all of your other weapons are melee weapons, so unless you're going range Zerker, you're not even going to use this to like parry or block with if you end up getting King Fleshpound or Hans or something. And that would be really its only use. The EMPs are an interesting grenade that have a lot of utility and can honestly be pretty useful in most situations because you throw an EMP down, it doesn't really do that much damage. It's very unlikely to actually kill something, but it does make it so enemies can't use their special abilities, which is very useful even on boss wave, since you can throw this on the Matriarch and she can't cloak. She also seems to get stunned and can't use her laser. You can also throw this on King Fleshpound and he kind of freaks out. Patriarch also will stop trying to do whatever the heck he's trying to do most of the time unless he's already caught in the animation. Same goes with pretty much all the bosses. If they're already in the middle of the animation, the EMP doesn't do much. But this is very useful for disrupting things like bloats and husks, which are huge deals for you to deal with without a reliable ranged weapon as Berserker. So the EMP is a pretty decent grenade. I'm going to put it up in a B tier. I think it's a pretty solid grenade, and it can't really hurt you, which is also kind of a nice bonus to it. So good utility and good use. Maybe not the best grenade in the game, but definitely not the worst grenade in the game either. Up next we got our 9mm, and the 9mm is going to go into D tier for Berserker. You're basically just going to be using this to pick off bloats at the start and maybe husks later on, and that's about it, because if you have a melee weapon, you don't have to worry about running out of ammo. Certain melee weapons do have ammo, but even then you don't need it with them, like the Pulverizer or the Hemoglobber. So unless you're running full range Zerker, it shouldn't really be an issue. And even if you're running full range Zerker, unless it's the nail gun plus the Tesla rifle, you will still have a melee option because you can still punch with the Piranha pistols, as well as you can always attack with the Eviscerator. Moving on to our tier 2 weapons, we have the Katana right away, and the Katana has seen better days. Unfortunately, the Katana was once one of the best weapons to take as a secondary. It's pretty much been replaced since then. There's not really a reason to take it. It is lightweight, it does attack quick, which is nice. So if you really don't like the Krovel, it's a great option to take there. But there's not really a reason to take it, at least if you're comfortable with the Krovel, because you can just save up for a better weapon later on, and its weight doesn't really matter all that much now. Its upgrades honestly aren't that great either. One thing that it does excel at though is light attacks. It is probably one of the best light attacking weapons in the game, so if you really like that and you just want to spam light attacks, it's not bad. And it's also got some cool abilities like it having the special draw cut if you switch to it and then hold in your power attack, or I think any attack. Same with its stab is pretty nice. So it's not a bad weapon, but it has definitely seen better days, and I'm going to put it in the C tier. The Road Redeemer is exactly the same as the Katana in every single way. It has the same stats, it upgrades the same. The only difference is that it counts as blunt damage instead of slashing damage, and it also cannot stab. It just does the regular smash hit. There is technically one thing that's kind of worse about it than the Katana, and that's that it weighs one additional weight for whatever reason. It's basically just to show off. It's behind a different game that you have to buy if you want to get it, so you could argue this is the worst weapon in the game, and I don't think I would disagree with you. But if you do have it and you're trying to use it, it's basically going to feel the same as the Katana. So if you like the Katana, cool. If you don't, then don't use it. Up next we have the Fire Axe, which is also not the best weapon in the game. It does do decent damage. Its heavy attacks are pretty nice. It has a pretty easy to use attack since it's almost always vertical or horizontal slashes, which is nice for any sort of melee weapon. And it does have a high chance of stunning. The main problem though is that it doesn't really scale as well as some of the other weapons do for melee weapons, and it doesn't necessarily outcompete the Kroval right away. It will hit harder than the Kroval, so if you want to take it for more consistent kills on things like rioters or bloats, it's not a bad option there. But again, if you're okay with the Kroval, you could just save some money and not go with the Fire Axe. So again, another C tier weapon. The nail gun is a really good option overall for both support and Berserker. It gives you a range option, which is nice. It's very ammo efficient because you can fire it one nail at a time, or you can fire it in the shotgun mode. I tend to use it in the shotgun mode. The nails count as piercing damage, which is very useful. They can bounce off of surfaces. It actually scales really well with upgrades, and it's not that expensive to grab a nail gun early on. So if you want a good early ranged option, you could just stick with the Kroval and go with the nail gun and use that basically through the whole game if you really wanted to. Nail gun is surprisingly good, even on Berserker, so I'm going to put this one high up into A tier. I think it is a very good weapon. Next up, we have a single Piranha Pistol. And the single Piranha Pistol for Berserker is okay. You can still block and parry with it. It gives you a ranged option. It is cheap, but then you also have the nail gun, which is also really cheap. And I don't think that one Piranha Pistol outcompetes the nail gun. I don't even think two Piranha Pistols on Berserker really outcompete the nail gun. But they aren't a bad option. The single Piranha Pistol is okay. It does decent damage, and it scales decently well with upgrades. Actually, both the Piranha Pistols do. I would probably put this one maybe into the low end of B tier, and I'd put two of these probably also into B tier, but higher up. I'm just going to keep them in the same tier, but I would say two Piranha Pistols is better because you do get more damage per second out of them. Of course, you can go pick up your saw blades so long as they don't fly out of the map or get to a part of the map where you can't get to. Then you can potentially have infinite ammo with these. The bash attacks on them are kind of okay, but most of the time you're just going to be using these as ranged options. Up next, we got the Frostfang. Frostfang has the axe blade on it, and it's the ice shotgun, which is really good. This is probably one of Berserker's best weapons, honestly. I'm going to put this one up into S tier. You can block and parry with this. The axe does high damage. It does more damage if something's frozen and you don't need to be the one to freeze it. You can freeze enemies, which is probably the most useful status effect in the game because it's just an immobile target where everybody can focus it down really easily. It kind of works all by itself. You don't need to throw upgrades into this. It doesn't weigh that much. It's not that expensive. It works against basically everything, and it's probably one of your best like boss killing weapons. So yeah, this one is really good. Speaking of really good, we got the Hemoclobber up next, which is also going to go up into S tier. This one's basically been S tier since it came out. They have nerfed it multiple times, but it's still really, really good. This is a healing bat that does decent damage with its light and heavy attacks. It actually does a lot of damage with its heavy attacks, at least in a big AoE, because it deals a big poison cloud to all enemies, as well as a big healing cloud to all allies, including yourself, which is very nice. It doesn't heal as much as it used to, nor does it hold as many charges as it used to. But that's not really a big deal when this only weighs 4. So you can take it with absolutely everything else that you would ever want with Berserker's arsenal. You can take it with the nail gun if you want a ranged option. You could take it with the Frostfang if you want a ranged option. You could take it with the Kroval if you wanted potentially slightly heavier hitting Kroval hits, I guess. It just works well with everything because there's nothing that you could take, even if you want to fully upgrade a single item, there's nothing that you could take that wouldn't let you also take the Hemoclobber, which is so good. And this is also the weapon that just completely kind of kills these two weapons right here, because there's no reason to save up for them when you can save up a little bit more and get a far, far more useful weapon. Pulverizer is a pretty decent weapon. I'm going to put this into low A tier, high B tier, somewhere around there. It does good damage with its heavy attacks, dealing explosive damage, so you can kill things like flesh pounds really easily with it. Its light attacks are where I don't really care for it all that much, because it does seem to do decent damage, at least on paper, but a lot of the time you can stun enemies with it, and if you stun an enemy with the hit, it seems to trigger the stun first and then the hit, so you're less likely to actually kill something and just knock it down, which is not as good. Again, heavy hits are really good though. Its heavy attack is pretty much what boosts it here. Then we've got the Zweihander. Zweihander is another DLC weapon. Zweihander I'm going to put into low A tier, same with the Pulverizer. It does high damage, its heavy attack is pretty nice, its light attack is pretty nice, and it has long reach with its stab. It also blocks and parries well. Overall, it's just a solid weapon. It kind of has been since it came out, so nothing really to complain about there. It also does decently well with upgrades, so it does get stronger. but it does kind of hit an awkward weight. I think it goes up to 9 weight. Next, we got the Tesla Launcher, and the Tesla Launcher, again, is a pretty decent weapon overall if you want a ranged option. I'm going to put this one into B tier. It's high up into B tier with the Piranha Pistols. This has microwave damage on it, which is really good. It has EMP grenades, which are also potentially really good, especially against bosses like the Matriarch. And it gives you another range option. It's a little bit pricey, and it doesn't do the most amount of damage per second out of your ranged options, but it's a solid all-around choice. Bone Crusher's up next, and Bone Crusher I'd also put into A tier, mostly because of how well it blocks. It's probably the best blocking weapon in the entire game. It gives you the most amount of damage reduction just from blocking and a high amount of damage reduction from parries as well. It does weigh a decent amount, and honestly its melee attacks are kind of just okay. Its bash attack is good, its heavy attack is kind of meh, and its light attack is pretty decent. So it's kind of got a mix of everything that sort of works. It's just that this one can block and parry things very easily, and you can block and parry a lot of things with this. It's very odd. You can block and parry the Patriarch's minigun. You can block Hanzo's assault rifles. You can block Husk Flames. It's kind of weird how many things you can actually get parry with. So if you're trying to get better with parrying, I would definitely recommend taking the Bone Crusher. Another kind of downside with this is that it blocks a decent amount of your screen when your person's holding it up. So, if you don't like that, then maybe don't use it. I don't really care for it that much. But if you can get over that, and if you end up just having to, turtle up in the corner with your shield, maybe you got multiple flesh pounds hitting you, this is probably your best option to be blocking with. Up next, we have the Static Strikers, and the Static Strikers are honestly kind of odd to me. They've always felt really weird. They're an okay weapon, but it's just like the block and parry window for them feels so off compared to the other weapons, and I'm not sure why. It just feels like there's like some sort of hang time in between going from just the resting position to an attacking position and then to a block and parry position. Its light attacks are okay. Its heavy attack is kind of useful because it can put the EMP status effect on enemies, which is very nice, especially if you want to go and run a punch husks or something, or sirens or whatever it might be. Outside that, I think they're kind of just an average melee weapon, and I would put them into like B tier. I think they're okay overall. Some people really like them though, and probably would argue them up to A tier. I understand that too, but they've never been for me. Then we've got our new weapon, which is the Blood Sickle. The Blood Sickle is a really, really weird weapon. This technically has the longest reach out of any of the melee weapons besides the special attack from the Ion Thruster. It even has longer reach than the Mosin Nagant with its bayonet, which is interesting. Now this is only in the fully extended mode. This one can switch between modes just by hitting your reload button. You can go to the long reaching mode or the short reaching mode. If it's in the short reaching mode, it has less reach, although it has the same reach as something like the Katana. Does decent damage with both its light and heavy attacks, and has a stab attack, which is kind of nice. Every hitbox about this though feels very weird. Same goes with when it flips to its heavy attack mode. You have longer reach and you have more damage with its light attacks and with its heavy attacks. However, they're almost always in a diagonal pattern, which makes it really easy to accidentally hit things in the arms like Scrakes and Flesh Pounds, where you basically are doing very little damage. So hitting something in the head, you kind of have to step to the side of something, hit it, and then step back to the other side of it to hit it with the other swing. Very awkward and a very weird weapon, but fairly strong when it does work. So I don't really know where to put this one. I go back and forth on it. I think I'm going to put it in the low end of A tier, but honestly it feels so wonky. I imagine if you got really used to its swing pattern, it would probably feel pretty strong overall. Up next we got the Eviscerator, which I will also put up into A tier. The Eviscerator is pretty great too. It does high damage per shot from its saw blades. You can use it as a chainsaw for dealing pretty decent DPS to smaller enemies, and its regular attack, or I guess its stab attack, is pretty okay for killing the majority of normal enemies too. Block and parry is actually really good with this thing. It's just that it weighs quite a bit, and there was a time where the Eviscerator was much stronger. It's not as strong now, but it's still a pretty decent weapon. You can still take it on boss wave and do very well. You can take it as just your primary or only weapon that you want to take. First up, we got the Battle Axe for our tier 5s, and the Battle Axe is probably like C tier for me. It's just honestly not that great. It swings so slow. It does hit really hard with its heavy attacks. Its stab is pretty nice. There's no reason to be using its light attacks. That's not the reason to take the Battle Axe. It also weighs a ton. It weighs 10, so it's one of the heaviest weapons in the game. And that big wind up for those swings, I just don't really feel like it's ever really worth it. It feels so out of sync compared to so many of the other weapons, but it's okay overall if you want to use it. Then we've got the Ion Thruster, another DLC weapon, and this one's probably S tier as well. This one gets you good light attacks, good heavy attacks, good stabs, as well as a very long reach overall with all of those hits. And then it has the longest reach in the game with its power attack, so you use this once you have built up enough energy. Energy is gained from just killing stuff, or just hitting things with light attacks, or heavy attacks, or parries, or blocks. They all build up energy. Once you get to 100%, you hit your reload button, and you swing this thing out, hitting everything in front of you, knocking everything down that you didn't just flat out kill, and just dealing a whole lot of damage. So this is where I put all of Berserker weapons. There's not really a bad Berserker weapon to be picking. There's just some of them are a bit better than others. Some of them do a similar job, but maybe do it a little bit better. A good case in point would be something like the Zweihander and the Ion Thruster, where the Ion Thruster is basically better than the Zweihander at everything, so you might as well just take that. But the Zweihander is a pretty cool option, and it's not that much worse than the Ion Thruster if you want to use it. I guess I could have also included the Dash Gun here, but honestly, which Berserker is taking the Dash Gun? That's not really a weapon that Berserker would ever really want or need, unless you were just playing on like Endless and you just had so much Dash to spend. If it was for Berserker, it's down in D tier. There's no reason to take it out Berserker. All of your weapons are going to be worth way more than the Dash Gun is. At pretty much at any point during the game, because you don't really have to worry about ammo with most of these. Thanks everybody for watching this. I really do appreciate it. Next up, we're going to be looking at Survivalist, because they also got a new weapon with the Locust, which means I'm going to go through all of the weapons again. So that should be fun. Special thanks to the supporters of this channel. These are my members over here on YouTube, patrons over on Patreon. They get early access to videos just like this, and if you'd like to be a part of it, you can. There are links down in the description. Thanks to everybody who does that. I really do appreciate it. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye!